everybody, my name is Wayne.
My name's Katie.
And this is Purity Matters Adult Edition. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, right now we're taking our students through a Purity Matters series on Wednesday nights, and we're going to culminate in a purity commitment ceremony later in February. And it's similar to the old True Love Waits many of us are familiar with, but this is kind of our own little take on it. And so over the course of the next month and a half on Wednesday nights, we are going to be talking about the issue of purity and how to have purity in your life and the importance of purity and all that. So what we want to do is offer a tool for you as adults, parents, grandparents, or concerned adults who maybe have some influence in the life of a young person to know what we're talking about and give you some talking points so that you can take some opportunities and some teachable moments to really maybe impact the lives of the students that are in your life. Okay, and so as you partake in these things and listen to these videos or watch these videos, I also want to encourage you to allow yourself to be challenged by the material, because as adults, if we're not living lives of purity ourselves, we can't very well call students to live lives of purity. You are the greatest example in the life of a child. So let this challenge you as well, and think about the areas of your life where maybe you need to clean up a little bit and create a little bit more purity. Now, Purity Matters is the title of this series, and the subtitle is Pure Living in a Poisoned World. And it doesn't take much looking around to really see the rampant immorality in the world around us. And so often we find it hard as believers to live lives of purity when we're surrounded by so much impurity. And the topic of this first session is that if purity does not matter to you, then it won't happen. If purity doesn't matter, then it won't happen. No one is accidentally pure. It's an intentional thing, okay? And at my house, we have a sewage treatment plant. And a sewage treatment system is a little bit different than maybe just a sewer system or a septic tank system. In my sewage treatment plant, all of our sewage comes out of our house and it goes into this holding tank where a little air pump is blowing air in constantly, and the microbes inside of that holding tank are supposed to eat all of the bad stuff, right? And so that whatever comes out on the other side of this sewage treatment plant is supposed to be clean water. So I will tell you that on the other end, there's a pipe that comes out, and on the other end, most of the time, it's pouring out pretty clear water. The EPA says that that water is 99.7% pure. But let me tell you something that you're never going to see. You're never going to pass my house and see old Wayne out there at the end of that pipe with a cup, you know, collecting water for a drink. Even though that'd be a great way to reduce, reuse, and recycle, I am not going to drink the sewage water, okay? Because even though it's 99.7% pure, it's that 0.3% that's a problem. And one of the things we talked about last night is the 3-second rule. Mm-hmm. So like Katie, at your house, do you guys have the 3-second rule?
We do. It's conditionally though, like it depends on where you drop it.
All right, so give me some examples there.
Like if I was to drop, Daniel loves Skittles, and if Daniel drops a Skittle on the kitchen floor, he'll probably pick it up and eat it, and I'd say, okay, that's fine. But if he went to like his bathroom and dropped a Skittle on the floor, it would be a completely different game. You don't eat a Skittle on the bathroom floor.
Or let's say you had a bag of M&Ms and you're in, I don't know why you would be in the bathroom at Walmart with a bag of M&Ms. Well, let's say you are, okay, and you drop one of those M&Ms on the floor. Do you pick it up and eat it, or just kind of kick it? You kind of kick it over.
You don't even want to pick it up and throw it away.
Yeah, because purity matters to us. We don't want to put things inside of our mouth that are not pure. If you find a hair in your food at a restaurant, I'm pretty sure that it affects your appetite. Okay, so in our physical lives, we want things to be pure. We don't want to put things in our mouth that are nasty. We don't want to wear clothes that are nasty. We don't want to sleep in a bed full of bed bugs. We want to sleep in a bed that's clean with clean sheets. We don't want to wear dirty clothes. We want things in our lives to be pure. Now, what's ironic is that we don't often give that same priority to purity in the spiritual realm of things. Oftentimes, as believers, we're perfectly happy to compartmentalize our lives and feel like that as long as some areas of our lives are pure, it really doesn't matter if we have this one area of impurity that maybe nobody knows about. Okay? But that's a real problem, because your purity as a person before God, as a believer, it's not based on just what you do at church or what you do in your 15-minute quiet time every day. It's based on the average of your whole life. And so that one little area really does bring down your level of purity. It affects you and pulls you down. So purity matters. But the truth is, if it doesn't matter to you, then purity is not going to happen. No one is accidentally pure. If you want to be pure, you have to be intentional about it, okay? So, let's ask the question then. Why should I be so concerned with living a pure life, okay? Well, there's some scripture that talks about this, and it comes from 1 Peter 1, 15 through 16. It says, "As the one who called you is holy, you also are to be holy in all your conduct. For it is written, 'Be holy because I am holy.'" Now, what does holy mean? Well, a good definition of holy is that it means dedicated or devoted to the service of God, the church, or religion, saintly, godly, pious, devout, or it could refer to a holy life, or it could mean to be set apart. Now, Katie, in your house, do you have any things that are set apart?
Probably like our electronics. For me personally, those go in like a certain place, like in my room on a desk. You know, I wouldn't just throw my MacBook on the floor or something like that. That would be probably a set apart thing.
All right, so like at our house, Legos. Mm-hmm. Like we have a Lego box that has a quadrillion Lego pieces in it. And I know quadrillion is like bigger than billion. So there's like a ton of Lego pieces from all of these different things. And they stay in one of our son's room, okay? But there's also these Lego sets. Like my kids spend like crazy amounts of money over the years on Legos. So like some of these things cost like $100, okay?
Goodness.
So my older son has some Star Wars Lego sets that he has built, and those are actually sitting up on a display case in his room, while all of the rest of the Legos are down here in just like this Rubbermaid tote. These are set apart. They're special. They're different. There's something about them that makes them important over these others. Okay? And that's really what holiness is. Holiness is when we have, we use it as a religious word, but really anything that's kind of set apart and special is holy in a way. Okay? But when we're talking about ourselves from a spiritual standpoint, God calls us to be holy. That means to be different, to be set apart. So if the world is living one way and the world is doing certain things, believers, the way that we're set apart is by doing things a different way, by living a different way. Now, what is one of the things that you hear so often among people who say they don't believe in God? Part of the reason they don't is because they don't see how believing in God changes the life of a believer. Too often, we watch the same movies, listen to the same music, dress the same, right? Read the same stuff.
Act the same way.
I was about to say, act the same way. use the same language, tell the same jokes, and it's so hard for a watching world to look at us and see any difference whatsoever. But God calls us to that. Why does He call us to that? Because He is holy Himself. Okay? And He wants us to come alongside Him and to be covered, to be saturated in His holiness. Katie and I have been together for a while now. I knew Katie when Katie was in diapers, okay, like 1 year old, I think. Yeah. And but Katie's come through our student ministry as well, so she was under my teaching for about 6 years, and now Katie is kind of my unofficial ministry assistant, and so she's still like, I'm kind of like a mentor to Katie. But would you say that in all of that time, maybe I've kind of rubbed off on you a little bit?
Definitely, yeah. I can tell that I kind of talk like you sometimes.
All right, so we talk alike. There's a lot of things that we think alike on, and we believe very similarly on some things, because Katie came alongside of me, and over the course of the last 7-8 years, I've been teaching Katie, right? And so what I believe is kind of, in the way that I live, and the things that I think have kind of rubbed off on her. Well, that's what holiness does. When we come alongside God, when we draw near to God, and we get close to Him, His holiness starts pouring off on us. Now, let's talk a little bit about this quote here by Haley DeMarco. Haley DeMarco is the author of a book called Technical Virgin, How Far is Too Far? And she traveled all around the country and interviewed teens. A good part of those were girls. And her question is, what makes them different? What makes a Christian teenager different from a non-Christian teenager? And here's what she said. She said, what used to be happening in high school is now happening in 8th grade. I found no difference between Christian girls and non-Christian girls, except that they talk a good show and acted really nice in front of me. So one of the things that I'm kind of afraid of is that in the Christian church, specifically the church in America, we have made it very easy for people to come to church, act a certain way at church, act a certain way at home, but then behind the scenes there's absolutely no difference between them and the rest of the world. And that's not holiness. Holiness affects every part of your life. We want to compartmentalize our lives so that we have a life at church, a life with friends, a life with family, a life at work, a life at school, a life in sports, a life that's just us when nobody else is around, right? Our internet life, our social media life. We have all of these different boxes. And we feel like some of those boxes are holy boxes, and some of those boxes are our boxes to do with what we want. But true holiness affects every box. It saturates every box. And that's what God calls us to. All right? So why should I be concerned with living a pure life? Because God calls you to it. Why else? Well, because your purity is a testimony. People are watching you, okay? And they're watching to see how you live. Proverbs 20:11 says, even a young man is known by his actions, by whether his behavior is pure and upright. And so reputation. A reputation is what other people think about you. So you can have a good reputation or you can have a bad reputation based on other people's opinion of you as a person. Testimony is what you say about yourself. The definition of it is an open declaration or profession as of faith. So testimony is what I say I believe or who I say I am. Reputation is who other people see me to be. So when your reputation and your testimony match up, what do we call that? Integrity. Character. When those two things match up, we say you're a person of integrity. Who you say you are is who you really are, because that's what other people think. But when your reputation and your testimony do not line up, what do we call that? Hypocrisy. And so one of the biggest arguments that you hear against Christianity on the part of unbelievers is, I don't want to go to that church. That church is full of hypocrites, right? It's just this idea that we say one thing, but then we go and we live a different way. And I hate to say this, I've been a believer since I was 7 years old, and I'm 43. So that's 36 years I've been a believer. And in 36 years, one of the biggest things that turns me off to Christians is, guess what? Christians. Right? Because I see it too. I mean, there is hypocrisy. We say one thing, but then we do something else. We say we're holy people. We condemn certain things, but then we go, like we said earlier, watch the same things, read the same things, listen to the same things, say the same things, and even dress the same way as the rest of the world. So what we need to understand is that people are watching us, and they're watching everything we do, and our purity is a testimony that what we say we believe is actually what we believe. See, get this. Purity ties together testimony and reputation. It's the glue that brings those things together and makes you a person of integrity. Paige made this statement. She said, "My commitment to purity has caused me to avoid things that others embrace. And it's easy to say no to things I shouldn't look at or listen to because I have God to help me." It kind of clashes with the lifestyle of those around me, and they know it, but they also respect me for my choice. I think a lot of times we want to be like the world because we want the world to love us.
Mm-hmm. We want to be accepted.
We want to be accepted, exactly. But I would rather be respected than accepted.
And we're not called to be accepted.
Exactly. Yeah. God calls us to be different, to be set apart, okay? And so God calls us to holiness. Reason number one. Reason number two, your purity is a testimony. And reason number three is that your purity is also an example, okay? 1 Timothy 4:12 says, "No one should despise your youth. Instead, you should be an example to the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity." Despise. That's a pretty loaded word, right? And it means to regard with contempt, distaste, disgust, or disdain, scorn, or loathe. I think there are some lost people who despise Christian people, right? Because we're not living out the proper example, okay? And last night, as we were talking about this with our students, I asked the questions. Why do some older people despise younger people? And some really good reasons were given. Someone said, well, it's because they don't see us as being wise. It's a very good answer. Mm-hmm. Another answer was given because they don't think we have experience. That's a good answer. Another one said, well, because young people are like a bunch of hooligans. I thought that was like the best answer of the night, because one of the reasons that older people look at younger people and go, hey, I don't respect you, is because young people do have a tendency to kind of not have it all together in the area of integrity and character. That's something that they kind of learn as they go through life. But Paul is writing to young Timothy here, who was probably a teenager himself, maybe in his older upper adolescent years, and says to him, don't let anyone despise your youth. Instead, set an example. Be an example. We talked about last night that, and you may not know this, but the largest group, or the largest age group in America right now that has the biggest unreached number of people in it are the baby boomers. Did you know that before last night? Mm-mm. So like the baby boomer generation has more lost people in it than the millennials or the Gen Xers or the Gen Zers or any other generation, the baby boomers. Now we tend to think that old people all know Jesus and they all believe, right? But it's the baby boomers, the senior adults, who have the least number of believers out of all of these other generations. So what does that mean? Well, what we told our students last night is that more than any other generation before them, they are uniquely situated in history to live out 1 Timothy 4:12, to be an example to older people who are watching them live. When they live lives of purity, lives of integrity, lives of holiness, it sets an example even for their grandparents, mm-hmm. right? Because purity sets an example. Two guys made some quotes that I wanted to bring out. One of them is Charles Barkley. We all know who Charles Barkley is. Pretty big literally
Basketball,
and figuratively, okay? But he says, I'm no role model. In other words, I don't want to be a role model. I don't want anybody to look to me as a role model. But do people look to Charles Barkley as a role model?
Boys, I guess.
Yeah. Katie says, I don't.
I don't.
But absolutely people do. So it doesn't matter whether you want to be an example or not. The truth is, everybody has somebody who's
You're
watching
naturally
them.
an example.
Yeah. And Tobey Maguire, though, the first Spider-Man, he says, I think the greatest way to learn is to learn by someone's example. People are watching us. And a lot of us think, man, nobody's watching me. I'm not a role model to anybody. I'm not an example to anybody. But the fact of the matter is, every one of us has somebody watching us, whether we want to admit it or not. So all of us are setting some kind of example. You're either setting a good example or you're setting a bad example. So God calls you to purity. Purity is a testimony, and your purity is an example. Those are 3 reasons that we ought to be living lives of purity. So how do you make sure that you're doing that? Very quickly, 5 quick ways to make sure that you are living a life of purity. 1, you have to purpose in your heart. We said purity doesn't happen on accident. If it's not important to you, it will not happen. So you have to purpose in your heart. I want to be a person of purity. Guard your gates. Your eyes and your ears are the gates to your soul. What you let in your eyes and what you let in your ears finds its way into your heart and affects the kind of person you are. So guard your gates. Communicate your commitment. To be accountable to other people. Okay? But then also, like in a dating relationship, be open about your faith and communicate early what your commitments are to the Lord and your commitment to holiness. Don't wait until the heat of the moment and say, oh, that's not, I'm not going there. No, you're up front. Girls, a guy should know, hey, look, man, I'm going to hold your hand, but don't expect much more than that, I think part of the reason girls don't do that is they're afraid that when they set boundaries, what are guys going to do? He'll leave. But if he leaves,
then he's not right for you.
Yeah, you didn't need him anyway. He was just going to cause you to create, he doesn't bring impurity into your life.
He would bring you into compromising situations.
So avoid compromising situations. We told our students last night, I told our guys, I don't know what you told the girls, I said, man, if your parents aren't going to be there, don't take a girl back to your house. You know that's going to be a compromising situation. Don't go parking out at Bonita Lake.
With the girls, I talked about the back seat because
you know that's a compromising situation. Don't go there.
There's zero reason to.
I told our guys, if you know, listen, nothing good happens after everybody goes to bed at night. Don't be on the internet after everybody goes to bed. Avoid that compromising situation. We'll talk more about that next week. And then flee. If you find yourself in a situation, get out of there. Don't go, oh, I can weather it. I can handle it. Get out. Flee. And so that's where we were last night with our students. And I hope it's encouraged you and challenged you. And I hope that you will find an opportunity to talk with the students in your life about this material as well. And maybe even be challenged by it to live a life of purity yourself. So we'll see you next week. Again, I'm Wayne.
I'm Katie. Thanks for watching.